and we'll get that up, and that'll start in just a second. There we go. Okay, right then, Sean, as agreed, this portion of the session is now being recorded, and we're going to use this to basically reflect and review your communication assignment. The purpose of using the professional discussion is to go through your answers, but basically just to allow you to demonstrate knowledge, skills, and behaviours across each of the answers, so you can expand on those answers if need be. So it's a good opportunity to get in any additional evidence on top of your answers if you're happy to do that and continue.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So can you see that screen okay, Sean? Are you able to make that out and read off it okay? Okay, perfect. So the first question was, how do you build and manage effective relationships with customers through successful communication? If you could just read out your answer for us, Sean.
Yeah. So make customer communication timely and relevant. Don't spam existing customers, but also be careful not to contact them too infrequently. Target tailored messages that customers are called in to what they are interested in via their preferred medium is the best way to build relationships.
That's it. So you will have different relationships, and you would have built different relationships with customers within your building. So the tenants that work within your building, you're going to know there because they're going to go there every day, Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. You'll see these guys every day. Now, you'll know that you probably can think of a couple of people, Sean, that might, come in, say good morning. You might then say good morning. Hope you have a good day. This kind of verbal exchange will be used. You can probably think of other examples as well, whereby there might be some guys that come in, they'll have their AirPods in, they're looking down, they're on their phone, and they might not even acknowledge you. But in terms of communication, the best form of communication for them, what type of thing would you use for them? So if they've got their AirPods in, so they're not going to hear you say hello. So what might you do instead?
Like use hand gestures, because that's the best way to get acknowledgement.
Yeah, exactly. So you can gesticulate, so you can give them a wave or a smile if they look up, and that would be the preferred style for those kind of customers. Just like you'll have customers through like contractors, so people that come in the building that you have to communicate to, as well as clients, and as well as managers and different staff that you work with as well. You probably know that the more you speak to somebody informally or formally through meetings and one-to-ones, and even through informal conversations, you get to know them a little bit more, and you get to build rapport. So you can ask questions and get to know a little bit more about them as a person. And generally, the more you get to know someone as a person, the more effectively you can tailor your approach to them as a member of staff. So because you know what they're like, you know which kind of communication style to use. So you might think, oh, so this manager that you've got is really, really busy. So rather than request like a face-to-face meeting with him, the chances are you might give him an email just to keep him informed of what's going on, and he can answer that in his own time. Whereas if it's something quite urgent, you might phone them straight away. So that's what we're going to come on to in a second. So selecting the most appropriate manner, but basically that's how you've said that you manage and you build effective relationships through communication. So you have regular contact with them. So you said that it's important not to contact them too infrequently. So once you have initial communication and you build that initial rapport, it's important to keep that going, to have regular conversations and communication with them. Okay, as we've mentioned, Sean, the next one will be, how do you select the most appropriate medium and manner to communicate with customers? So you've broken these down and give really good examples here. So if you just want to talk through these for us, Sean, as well.
Yeah, so one of them is face-to-face and in-person face-to-face communication. Medium technically use both verbal and non-verbal expressions to communicate a message. Speakers state their message through verbal and gestures and other non-verbal cues to emphasize their meaning and intent. Listeners receive and process the message as the speaker delivers it, and they may respond immediately with their own thoughts and questions.
Yeah, exactly. So the benefit of this form of communication is that you can you can gauge someone's initial response, or they can gauge your response. So you can really find out very quickly whether they're understanding what you're talking about, and vice versa. It's quicker in a lot of circumstances as well, because it's very much back and forth in terms of a conversation. You can always and also engage with active listening, that we're going to speak about a little bit later on. So you can take the time to basically do what we're doing now. So I'm speaking and you're nodding to say, yeah, I understand what you're saying, and then you'll do and then you'll retort, or you'll give something back, and then I'll nod, and then I'm listening and intently paying attention to make sure I can then weigh up the information that you're giving me, so I can then select my approach as well. So that's really useful in a lot of scenarios when things and information have to be given quickly. The next one is virtual and remote communication, which you went in to deal with. We'll go through these quickly, Sean, because you've given really good answers here. And written communication as well, you used. And you also mentioned previously in previous sessions, you've also used digital communication before. So you've had jobs before whereby you use like WhatsApp groups for more kind of social based work, slightly more informal things to keep everybody abreast of when the Christmas party is, or it's such and such's birthday next week, so who's going to bring in the cake, all of that kind of important stuff. Okay, next we've got, give an example of how you've adapted your communication to suit your audience. So if you could read out your answer for us, Sean, for that.
When talking to different people, I would vary my tone to fit the surroundings and the way that I'm talking to them. For example, that I'm not talking down to them or talk to them like they're stupid. When I am talking to people, I always think, treat people how I would like to be treated. And if they don't understand the first time and they ask you to repeat it, I would change the way that I first said something to make sure that they understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So a really good example of this, Sean, is if there's language barriers, for example. And also, if we think back to the last assignment that we did with managing self, where we learned all about learning styles. You also mentioned in that, so once you've gained an understanding of what different learning styles are, and you're able to identify what your own learning style is, you can then maybe look to identify what other people's learning styles are as well. So if it's verbal, if they learn better through verbal communication, then that's the approach that you would read. If you know that somebody you work with learns better through kinesthetic learning, so if you have to give training on a task, for example, or show somebody what to do, you'd actually show them rather than speak to them about it, or maybe talk them through it whilst you're doing it. So that's what these first couple of units kind of cover, kind of managing self, learning styles, communication styles. In the next unit in team building, we'll also look at leadership styles as well. And that fits under the same conversation of how you're able to adapt different styles and remain flexible to using different styles to tailor your approach depending on who it is that you're dealing with, or the kind of situation that you're dealing with as well. Okay, so next, Sean, you've got give an example of when you have chaired a meeting. So we know that you don't necessarily chair a lot of meetings in terms of standing up in front of a lot of people to present. However, we can give examples. So we mentioned on the team meeting and face-to-face. So team meetings that you might have with your line manager. So you might initiate that. So if you need to have a catch-up meeting with a line manager, or if it's a face-to-face situation where you have to do a handover, like a morning or evening handover to staff, you're still presenting information, you're still sharing in terms of even though it might be only with 1 or 2 people, you're still exchanging information, and you're taking charge of that situation by making sure that you communicate clearly with them. Just like we're doing now, you might even have meetings with managers on Teams, if you don't do it face to face as well. So whenever you're asked to present information or chair a meeting, you can give an example of that regarding the handovers that you do every morning and every evening, where you're exchanging information to that person. You're taking charge of that exchange to make sure they're getting the information that they need. So that would be a good example of that. So not only meetings online that you have, where you're taking charge of that and giving information, but also face-to-face meetings like handovers as well. So how do you ensure that you facilitate the contribution of others when you chair a meeting? Give a specific example. So we said this. So you mentioned break the group down if it's too big. So an example of that, Sean, would be if you've got lots of people in a room and you're trying to engage everybody, you can't necessarily go round with them one by one and say, what's your understanding of this? You know, what's your feedback of this? It's too time consuming. You're going to get too many answers. So what you could do in that situation is, if you've got a room full of like 9 people, for example, you could put them in groups of 3 and say, right, for the next 5 minutes, guys, we want you to talk about this task. And then in 5 minutes, one person from every group is going to be the spokesperson for that group, and each person's going to have 2 minutes to talk and give feedback. Therefore, the chances are everybody within those 3 groups are going to have a chance to be engaged and give feedback, and the chance to get involved. Just like if you do a face-to-face meeting, so you ask lots of questions. So you're giving. So when you do a handover, Sean, at the start of the day or the end of the day, what kind of questions do you ask the person that's taken over from you?
So it would be normally if there's any incidents that we need to be aware of.
Yeah.
Anything that we need to know of. So if we've got any events, if there's any contractors, any visitors coming in.
Yeah.
So it's just
okay. Okay, so you're exchanging all this information. So what's happened in the previous 8-10 hours? So that is need to know basis. They have all the information they need to be able to conduct the tasks and what they need to on their shift. You might give them updates. So you're expecting this contractor to come in at this time, or you're expecting these people to come in at this time, or just let you know that like the toilet's out of order on floor number 2, for example. So somebody's been called about that. It's going to be fixed next Tuesday, for example. So they know. So if that person then gets asked any questions on that, they've got all the information relevant and at hand to be able to deal with it. So that's what's key in the handover, isn't it? But particularly for you, that you get given all the information you need to successfully manage and navigate your way through the shift. Now, things might happen during that shift to add to that, and so you can then pass that message on. And this is the kind of thing you might, at the end of the week, have to report to your line manager. So these are all the main points for this week. So how often do you do any meetings like that with your manager, Sean, where you have to give them updates like weekly or monthly?
We normally do it during the handover. So
Okay.
they would get a daily handover.
Yeah.
And then if there is any incidents, then we'll just send them another email on top of that, just to explain what was going on, what's happening.
Okay, excellent. So that kind of covers a presentation that you've made to the team regarding your handover example, and a presentation that you've made to management. So when you give that feedback to them, and we'll come on to feedback in a little bit as well. Right, next, Sean, is give an example of how you have approached a challenging conversation. So if you could read out your answer for that for us, mate. C4.
when I was talking to contractors and to delivery drivers, when they don't know where they're going or how to get somewhere, they sometimes how to get somewhere. This is because due to language barrier.
Okay. So what if you could just expand on that a little bit, Sean? So
Yeah.
can you give us a specific example of when that's happened and how you dealt with it and what approach did you take?
Yes. So we'd have a delivery for the kitchen, and we say that where the loading bay is, and sometimes they don't understand. So what we do is we point where to go.
Yeah.
And then also we show them on the map how to get there.
Okay, excellent. So do you have so if that's happened a couple of times, might you then use like a little printout map of the building and kind of you can show them kind of specifically how to get there, like a route? Or has there been any times where you've actually had to take them to the to where they need to be?
No, so we would tell them where to go. We show them on the map, and then we would meet them at the back of where the load bay is, and we'd show them where to go.
Okay, excellent. So some of that's quite challenging conversations because we've mentioned before, some of them get quite annoyed with the fact that they're not been allowed to go straight there, or they don't know why they can't just leave it at reception, like that kind of thing. So you then explain to them that there are certain policies and processes in place. This is what you have to do. This is where you need to go. And so hopefully next time, if they come out again, they'll know exactly what to do. So why do you think it's important in that situation, Sean, to be really clear with them?
It's just so that they know that they've got to follow the rules as well, like everyone else.
Yeah.
It's a policy that we've got, so everyone has to follow it.
Yeah, that's it. And how do you speak to them? Do you always remain calm, kind of respectful?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So that's your that's the example of how you approach a challenging conversation. So somebody's come in, they've tried to make a delivery, they've tried to drop it at reception, they've not. You've explained to them that's not possible in line with your policy. The process is that they're going to have to then drop it at the loading bay. You've given them directions of where they need to go, and you've explained to them that's what needs to happen. You will meet them there and you will talk them through the situation. So you're very clear with them, you're helping them as much as possible. So even in a situation where you're not, they've said, oh, I'm okay to just drop this delivery here, where you said no, you've explained, the reason why they can't do that. And even though they might get frustrated, you've collaborated with them and you've been able to explain that the reason why you can't drop this here is because this is the policy and process that we have. It shouldn't take you long. Look, let me show you on a map where you need to go. I will then meet you there and show you how to do it. And hopefully that resolves the issue in a lot of those situations, Sean, and they're kind of happy with that at the end, because ultimately you're getting them where they need to go, even though it might have taken them a little bit more time. And you're also managing their expectation as well, and you're using clear and concise information and communication to make sure that they'll know for next time.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, next one, Sean, is C5. Explain how you provide constructive feedback. So if you remember in the last session, we spoke about the difference between feedback and constructive feedback. Do you remember the example that we used?
I'm not too sure, but what I said was start with the positive, and then the weaknesses, and then finish off with the positive, and then suggest what they can do next time to make it work, or give a suggestion on how they can do it better than what they've done.
That's it. That's it. So what you're referring to, Sean, which we're not going to actually say the word of the or the phrase, because this is it's a formal recording, but it's a type of sandwich. That's the nickname of what you could in terms of information that you give people in this situation. So the difference between feedback and constructive feedback will be, the difference in feedback is, if I was your manager, you'd say, right, well done today, Sean. You've worked really hard. Good job. See you tomorrow. And that would be positive feedback. However, constructive feedback in that situation would be, well done, Sean. You've had a good, really well done today. We've had good feedback from one of the clients on how you dealt with them on this certain situation. You're really positive, and you gave them really clear instructions on how they needed to resolve their problems. So well done on that. The difference between the two is it gives you something tangible to work with. It gives you the why behind your good performance, so you can actually use that and think, well, if I've dealt with them this way before and I'm getting positive feedback about that, that's why I'm going to do it the same way next time. Does that make sense, Sean?
Yeah.
And just as you said, in terms of giving constructive feedback, it's often better, even if feedback is perceived as negative, even if you're focusing on a weakness, it's often better to give that feedback anyway and try to put a positive spin on it, because ultimately you're correcting an action, or you're correcting a behavior that will ultimately help somebody in the future. And the chances are you'd hope that they would take that the right way and see that you're helping them, rather than think, you're picking on me, because I've done it wrong. It's like, well, no, I'm not. I'm giving you advice on how to do it right. And that's based on constructive feedback. If you were just to give feedback and say you've done that wrong, okay, well, how have I done that wrong? Are you not going to advise me how? Well, here I am with constructive feedback. So during an observation, or when you might have trained staff before, Sean, if you see them doing something in a certain way, again, we spoke about learning styles a little bit earlier on. You can accommodate their learning style. So if you think, oh, this person learns better through reading or through kinesthetic learning, through doing a task, you might actually show them how to do it whilst explaining it to them. So you can say, oh, I've seen that you're managing this task that way. Would you allow me to give you a little bit of advice on that, because it might allow you to do it a little bit quicker? And hopefully they'll say, yeah, thanks, that'll be really useful. So I've done it this way before, and I've found that it's a little bit quicker, because that's how this particular client or customer likes things done. And they can take that on board and say, what we can do is, if you want to practice that for the next week, and then in a week's time, if you've got any questions on that, you can come and find me, and I'll observe you doing it again, just to make sure you're doing it correctly. Does that make sense, Sean? So there's a big difference between kind of feedback and constructive feedback. So constructive feedback is really, really key in developing people and allowing them to understand what their strengths are, and kind of areas of development and what they can focus on. Whereas feedback alone, it's good to have, but if somebody just tells you, well done, Sean, you've done a good job today, you'll think, oh, thanks, that's nice, but you might be left thinking, how have I done a good job? In what way? Yeah. In what way was it good? So that's a good example. And you go on to this here. So when training a new member of staff or team member, after they've completed the task, tell them what went well and what they could do better next time. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Can you think of an example when you've actually done that, Sean? It might not necessarily be in this job role, but in previous job roles where you've been working with someone and you might have offered them advice on how to do it or how to do it better.
Yeah, in the army.
Yeah.
It's how they can. So they would how to pack their kit. They were doing it like a certain way, and we said, why don't you do it this way, because it's a lot easier.
Yeah. So that's the why behind the expression. So you're not just telling them, there's a better way of doing that, by the way.
Yeah.
And leaving it there, because they're then probably thinking, okay, you're gonna how? So you've told me that there is a quicker way. What's the quicker way? And then you'd hopefully then show them, so they can observe you doing it, and you can show them how to do it, so they'll then know for next time. That's the constructive part of the feedback. So as you said, you can start off with a positive. So you say, look, you've managed to pack your bourbon or whatever it is, or pack your correctly. However, let me give you a little bit of advice. That there is a quicker way of doing it. If you would allow me to show you how to do it, and then you would show them, and then you might then get them to say, right, do you want to have a go again? And whilst I observe, so you allow them to develop their skill set whilst you're watching as well. So that's a really good example. We then go on, Sean, to say some stretch and challenge. So we looked at the SBI model, so the situation, behaviour, impact. So we know that it helps you deliver more effective feedback. It focuses your comments on specific situations and behaviours, and outlines the impact that these behaviours have on others. So again, the mode of communication or the tone of voice that you use within your approach can go a long way in this type of situation feedback. So if I was to tell you, right, Sean, you are definitely going to get the team building assignment done by next week or else, and there's like finger pointing and that kind of stuff, I would never do that, obviously. It's just to prove a point. The chances are you would probably get that assignment done and you do it really well. Or if I said, right, what we're going to do, Sean, on the back of what we've done today, if we could start having a look at the resources, and if you could make a start on that team building assignment, if you could get it done by next week, that would be amazing. And I'd be really appreciative for that. The chances are you'd still then get it done and the outcome would be the same. However, our relationship would have been different because of the way that I've spoken to you in the first place. You're probably going to think less of me in the first example. And so that's going to have an impact. My behaviour is going to have a direct impact, potentially on the outcome of how that happened. We've then got different models of feedback. So we looked at CORBS, so how to give feedback as well. So CORBS, if you just run through what that stands for, Sean, because you've written that down and given a good example.
So it's clear, give information clearly and concisely.
Yeah.
And offer feedback as your perception, not the ultimate truth. Talk about how something's made you feel. Use the terms such as I find or I felt, and not you are.
Yeah.
Regular feedback is offered immediately or as soon as possible after the event.
Yeah, and that's really important as well, Sean. So it's time managed. So there's no point in getting somebody to do a task and then you giving them feedback on that a month later. They're gonna forget. It's not irrelevant, but it's not very well timed. So the sooner you can do that, the better.
Balance. Offer a reasonable balance of negative and positive feedback. Do not overload with negative feedback.
Yeah. So that comes into play with your constructive feedback, as you mentioned. So the good, negative, good, where you focus on kind of areas of development.
And specific feedback should be based on observed behavior and behaviors that can be modified.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can really earmark, you can really focus on, this was the area that needed to improve, or you did this area really, really well. So you can focus on the positives. And a lot of the time people take a lot from positives as well. Just like we did with if we think back to one of the early sessions that we did, Sean. So we did your 360 SWOT analysis. And on the back of that, you use self-reflection and areas that you felt were important for your job role. Now, within that, we considered things that were your strengths and areas that you felt you needed to develop. But we didn't stop at that alone. We related those specifically to the skill set required for your job role, because there were certain things that you rated yourself on a 3, for example, that was good. However, it wasn't really relevant for what your job role requires. However, so it wasn't that important. However, there were some tasks, there were some elements of the 360 SWOT where you labelled yourself a 4 out of 5, which was already very good. However, those skills are vitally important to your job role. So actually, we put those down to improve. And actually, even though you were very good, you want to be a 5. So it's not simply about focusing on areas of development based on weaknesses or based on perceived weaknesses. It can be based on a needs analysis, based on the needs of the business and on your job role and your needs as well. So that's important to remember as well. So regarding that specific feedback, so it has to be relevant.
Yeah.
Okay, that is everything on the assignment, Sean. So you did a really good job on that, mate. As I say, we use this to map in against the evidence for that unit as well. So we've got some really good practical examples. The purpose being, once we get to the end of the course, this communication unit will be part of your presentation.
Okay.
So we need to think about how we use examples practically of communication, so we could potentially talk through that, which is why we do the professional discussions on the back of these things. So that is it. I'm going to pause the recording there, Sean, because that is all we need from that, and then we'll move on.
Okay.